August 14th, 1977. The phone rings in the middle of the night. On one end of the line is a voice that the entire world recognizes, but the tone is wrong. It isn't the charismatic baritone of the king of rock and roll. It is the trembling, terrified whisper of a man who knows he is in danger. Elvis Presley isn't talking about his next hit record, and he isn't talking about the sold-out tour scheduled to start in 2 days. He is talking about betrayal. He says, "I found it. I know what they're doing to me." He is referring to a paper trail involving millions of dollars, federal crimes, and a conspiracy to keep him enslaved to a stage he could no longer physically endure. He was ready to fire everyone. He was ready to expose the truth. Exactly 48 hours later, Elvis Presley was found dead on his bathroom floor. The scene was sanitized before the police could even step inside. The autopsy was sealed for half a century. But the question remains, what did Elvis find inside Graceland that signed his death warrant? To understand why Elvis died, you have to step inside the nightmare he was living in during his final week. It is August 1977. To the outside world, Elvis is still a god, an untouchable icon draped in jumpsuits and glory. But inside the gilded cage of Graceland, the reality is a horror story. Elvis is a prisoner in his own home. He is overweight, paranoid, and heavily medicated, his body failing him after years of abuse. But despite the drugs clouding his system, Elvis was not stupid. In fact, in those final days, his mind was racing with a sudden, terrifying clarity about one specific thing: his money. Elvis had recently begun asking questions that made his inner circle sweating. He had sold more records than anyone in history. He had sold out hundreds of consecutive shows in Las Vegas. Yet, incredibly, he was cash poor. He was reportedly looking to borrow money just to keep the lights on at Graceland. How is that mathematically possible for the biggest star on the planet? Sources close to the timeline claim that roughly 48 hours before his death, Elvis finally got his hands on financial documents that he was never supposed to see. These weren't just standard receipts. They were evidence of a massive hemorrhage of his wealth. He discovered that while he was sweating on stage, destroying his health to perform, nearly 50% of his earnings were being siphoned off by his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. But it was worse than just a bad commission deal. Elvis allegedly found proof that he was being sold like a piece of livestock to cover gambling debts that weren't his. The truth, he discovered, was that the upcoming tour, the one he was dreading, the one he physically couldn't handle, wasn't booked because the fans wanted it. It was booked because the Colonel owed millions to the Las Vegas Hilton and other casinos. Elvis realized he wasn't performing for his legacy anymore. He was performing to save his manager's life from the mob. This realization shattered him, but it also lit a fire. Witnesses say Elvis was planning a purge. He was going to fire the Colonel. He was going to fire his father, Vernon, from managing his affairs. He was going to clean house. He told a backup singer, "Things are going to change around here. I'm taking control." But in the world of high-stakes entertainment and mafia-connected management, taking control is a dangerous game. By threatening to cut the cash flow, Elvis unknowingly put a target on his own back. He had the evidence, and he had the motive to blow the whole operation wide open, but he ran out of time. If Elvis was the prisoner, Colonel Tom Parker was the warden. To the public, he was the jolly, cigar-chomping marketing genius who created the king out of thin air. But the FBI files tell a completely different, far darker story. The man known to the world as the Colonel was actually Andreas Cornelis van Kuijk, an illegal immigrant from the Netherlands who was potentially fleeing a murder charge in his home country. He had no passport, no legal status, and lived in constant fear of deportation. This secret is the single reason why Elvis Presley, the most famous entertainer on earth, never toured internationally. He didn't stay in America because he loved it. He stayed because his manager was a fugitive who knew that if they ever left US soil, he wouldn't be allowed back in. The Colonel's secret past was the ultimate leverage that kept Elvis trapped. But by August 1977, the dynamic had shifted from symbiotic to parasitic. The Colonel's gambling addiction had spiraled completely out of control. It is estimated that he was losing over $1 million a year, in 1970s money, at the roulette tables of Las Vegas. Elvis was no longer a client. He was the Colonel's only lifeline, his personal ATM. When Elvis started making those late-night calls about firing the Colonel, the walls began to close in on the manager. Parker knew that if Elvis cut him off, the casinos would come collecting, and without the money to pay them, his protection would vanish. He needed Elvis to get on that plane for the next tour, dead or alive. To make matters worse, a psychological bomb had just detonated inside Elvis's life. A group of his former bodyguards, Red West, Sonny West, and Dave Hebler, had just released a tell-all book titled Elvis: What Happened. This book was hitting the shelves exactly around the time of his death. It exposed the drug use, the violence, and the instability inside Graceland for the first time. Elvis was devastated by this betrayal from men he considered brothers, but the Colonel used it as a weapon. He manipulated Elvis into believing that he was the only one who could protect his image from the scandal. He gaslit Elvis into isolation, convincing him that the world was against him, and that the tour was the only way to prove everyone wrong. However, there is a theory supported by some independent investigators that suggests the truth Elvis found wasn't just about the Colonel's theft. It was about a federal investigation known as Operation Fountain Pen. The FBI was actively looking into racketeering and fraud in the music industry. Elvis, in an attempt to free himself, may have reached out to federal contacts. Elvis had a well-known fascination with law enforcement. He collected badges and even met President Nixon to offer his services as an agent. If Elvis was preparing to turn into a whistleblower to save his own fortune and destroy the Colonel, he became the most dangerous man in Memphis. The tension in Graceland was thick enough to choke on. Everyone was watching everyone, and in the middle of this shark tank, completely surrounded by people whose livelihoods depended on his silence, Elvis went to his bedroom, hoping for sleep, not knowing the clock was ticking down his final minutes. Let's reconstruct the final timeline. It is the night of August 15th. The air in Memphis is humid and heavy. Elvis is restless, vibrating with a manic energy that defies his physical exhaustion. He visits his dentist late at night, a common practice for him, often suspected by insiders to be a convenient way to obtain prescription painkillers without official scrutiny under the cover of darkness. He returns to Graceland shortly after midnight. The iron gates close behind him with a finality that no one yet understands. Inside the mansion, the behavior is bizarre. Despite being exhausted, bloated, and stressed about the tour starting the next day, Elvis decides to play racquetball at 4 a.m. He is playing with his cousin Billy Smith and his girlfriend Ginger Alden. Outside, a summer storm is raging, rain lashing against the windows. Inside, the mood is frantic. He plays hard, sweating profusely, trying to outrun his anxiety, trying to burn off the cocktail of stimulants in his blood. After the game, he sits at the piano in the lounge. The last song he ever sings is Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. It is a haunting choice, a ballad about separation and eternal longing. He then goes upstairs to his master suite. This is a restricted area, a fortress of solitude where no one goes without an explicit invitation. He tells Ginger he is going to the bathroom to read. He takes with him a book titled The Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus, a study on the Shroud of Turin, a book about death, resurrection, and the search for truth. Here is the critical gap, where the official story begins to fracture. Between 4 a.m. and 2 p.m. the next day, absolute silence falls over the master suite. Usually Elvis had aides bringing him water, checking on his sleep, monitoring his breathing. He was a man with a known history of medical emergencies. But on this specific morning, the protocol failed completely. Why was he left alone for so long? Why did the aides who were responsible for his medication schedule and waking him for the tour not enter the room when he didn't stir? There are reports of a phone call made from the bedroom during these missing hours. A call that wasn't logged correctly in the house records. Was it a plea for help? Was it a final confrontation with someone? We know that Elvis took multiple cocktails of sedatives, barbiturates, and opioids throughout the night. Packets were found everywhere in the room. But the timing suggests something wasn't right. The codeine theory suggests he had a severe allergic reaction to a specific pill he shouldn't have taken, codeine, which caused him to go into anaphylactic shock. But who gave it to him? Elvis knew his own allergies. The window of opportunity for foul play or gross criminal negligence was wide open. For 10 hours, the king of rock and roll lay dying or dead on his bathroom floor, curled in a fetal position, just feet away from his sleeping girlfriend, while his massive entourage waited downstairs, preparing luggage for a tour that would never happen. The silence of those hours is deafening. It suggests that the people paid to protect him were either instructed to stay away, or they had simply stopped caring whether he woke up at all. At approximately 2:30 p.m., Ginger Alden wakes up and realizes the other side of the king-sized bed is empty. The silence in the master suite is heavy, suffocating. She knocks on the bathroom door. No answer. She pushes it open and finds the icon of the 20th century face down on the deep red shag carpet. He is cold. He is blue. Rigor mortis has already begun to set in, indicating he has been dead for hours. She screams, a sound that finally shatters the silence of Graceland, triggering a chaotic chain of events that is arguably more suspicious than the death itself. What happens next is highly disturbing. Before the police or the medical examiner could properly secure the scene, a clean-up operation began. When the paramedics arrived, they noted that the scene felt staged. Elvis was positioned in a way that seemed unnatural for a fall, but the real cover-up happened after the body was moved to Baptist Memorial Hospital. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, reportedly gave an order that baffles investigators to this day. He ordered the carpet where Elvis died to be ripped up and destroyed almost immediately. Why? The official excuse was to protect Elvis's dignity, to prevent photos of bodily fluids from leaking to the press. But to a homicide detective, destroying the scene of a death is destruction of evidence. Bottles of pills were allegedly swept into bags and removed from the room before investigators could catalogue them. The Graceland cleaning crew sanitized the master suite with military efficiency, wiping away fingerprints, fluids, and potential clues. Then came the official announcement. When the medical examiner, Dr. Jerry Francisco, faced the press, he did so before the toxicology report was even finished. He stared into the cameras and stated the cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia, and then, in a move that shocked his own colleagues, he emphatically added, "Drugs played no role in Elvis's death." This was a blatant, calculated lie. The toxicology report later showed 14 different drugs in Elvis's system, 10 in significant quantities. Codeine was found at 10 times the therapeutic level, a lethal amount for someone with Elvis's sensitivities. Why lie? Why rush the announcement? Because the insurance policy for the tour wouldn't pay out for a drug overdose. A natural heart attack preserved the money. A drug death voided the contract. The tour was insured for millions by Lloyd's of London. If the world knew Elvis died of an overdose, the estate would lose a fortune. It preserved the image, but more importantly, it preserved the assets. While the world wept, Colonel Parker was already on the phone dealing with RCA Records to print millions of new vinyls. He didn't even mourn. When a reporter asked him what he would do now that his client was dead, the colonel famously said, "Why, I'll just go right on managing him." The prompt destruction of physical evidence at Graceland makes it impossible to know if Elvis was slipped a fatal dose or if he simply took the wrong mix by accident. But the speed at which the evidence vanished suggests that someone knew exactly what had happened, and they didn't want the police asking the wrong questions. The cleanup wasn't about grief, it was about damage control. Elvis Presley died on August 16, 1977, but the mystery didn't die with him. In a move that has fueled conspiracy theories for nearly 5 decades, Elvis's father, Vernon Presley, had the full autopsy report sealed for 50 years. That implies that there is information in that report that was considered too damaging, too personal, or perhaps too dangerous for the public to know in 1977. That seal expires in 2027. We are inching closer to the day when the full medical truth will finally be revealed to the world. Speculation runs rampant about what those files contain. Will they show advanced bone cancer, as some family members have claimed in recent years to explain his pain? Will they show a genetic heart defect that made his death inevitable regardless of the drugs? Or will they confirm the darker, more sinister theory that the toxicology levels were inconsistent with self-administration, suggesting he was dosed by someone else? The truth Elvis discovered 48 hours before his death was likely the crushing realization that he was a product, fully exploited by a system that needed him to work until he dropped. He found out the extent of the theft, the lies about the tour, and the depth of the betrayal by the colonel. He tried to break free. He tried to reclaim his life. He picked up the phone. He made plans. He threatened to fire the people who controlled him. In the end, Elvis didn't just die of a heart attack. He died of a broken heart and a betrayed trust. He was the most famous man on earth. Yet in his final 48 hours, he was completely alone, surrounded by people who were counting his money while he was counting his final breaths. The tragedy of Elvis Presley is not that he died young. It is that he died a prisoner in a castle he built, guarded by a manager who viewed him as a renewable resource rather than a human being. Whatever he found in those documents, whatever he planned to do after the tour, was silenced forever on that bathroom floor. As we wait for 2027, one haunting question remains. If Elvis had successfully fired Colonel Tom Parker that week, would he still be alive today? Or was his fate sealed the moment he signed his first contract with the devil? The king is gone, but the shadow of his final 48 hours still hangs over Graceland. A reminder that in the music industry, the truth is often the first casualty.